Hello, peoples. It's time again. Tonight's show, we're going back to Mage, one of the most popular of the game line. And it seems to be very popular amongst even the guests that we have on for other shows. It tends to pop up right regular. Tonight we have Karl and Victor, who Victor is coming back from on one of our most recent shows, and he was also on our first race show. And Karl is here from our first Mage show. And so I would like y'all to say hi, Karl.
Hello.
Victor.
Hello.
And of course, my wonderful co-host, Jacob.
Hello, hello.
So, well, shoot, did I forget anything? I guess not. So let's jump right into this since we've been kind of warming up prior to the show. So, Jacob, your job, my man.
My job? Wow. You know.
You weren't ready for this, were you?
Oh, of course I'm ready for this. Because you always do this to me.
Of course I do.
We have actual jobs.
Well, he does.
So, like you said, we had Eric with, we had Karl. I think I actually was with Eric for our first Mage show.
Yes, it was.
And so now we got Victor. So let's get first Victor's thoughts or experiences with Mage so that he can kind of give us a feel for where his perspective or his angle's coming from here. I know he's actually been posting on Facebook on his wall quite a few comments about pop culture and Mage and stuff. So let's pick Victor's brain for a little bit here.
Yeah. So my first Mage book going way back was actually GURPS Mage when I was a poor, destitute high schooler and couldn't afford the real book. GURPS Mage was on a discount bin. Nobody wanted Mage for GURPS for good reason. Like, Mage is a great game. It doesn't work in GURPS at all.
No.
But I thought, oh hey, I'll get the sphere descriptions and I can improv everything else. It'll be great. So I bought it for I don't know, $15 or whatever, because like I said, the game store just wanted it to go away so they could get something else on the shelf. And I played I improv'd with that and the vampire rule book for a while in high school, and then I finally got a hold of a secondhand first edition Mage. And when I was first playing it, I did a lot of Mage characters in broad cross World of Darkness games, which is great for the Mage player, not so great for anybody else in the game. Mages tend to curb stomp storytellers that aren't in a Mage mindset.
Yes.
I annoyed the hell out of a lot of storytellers in college, I will just say. Yeah, letting me play a virtual adept in a cross game, they had no idea what they were getting into.
Right.
More recently, though, I was in a 6-month Mage game. It was actually run by one of the guys who used to write for The Line back in the day. And that one got really crazy really fast, and we decided to change tracks. And then I started running a Sorcerer's Crusade game right after that. And I sort of gave everyone a kick up on experience because they just spent 6 months getting out of that new PC level, and I didn't want to make them go back to it. So now we're 8 months into that game. So everyone's about a year into a pretty heavy experience kind of game. And for the first time, I'm learning what a headache having 6 master mages in a circle.
Oh,
no. When you have Scourge instead of Paradox. No Paradox. Let me tell you, a master mage rolling a 10 on 7 Scourge tests your improv skills.
Yes.
The ones test your improv skills too, but at least then you feel like you're holding them accountable for their ridiculousness. It's a super fun game, but it has definitely tested me as a storyteller. So yeah, I mean, right now I've read a lot of Mage, not all of it. I would say that probably the biggest hole in my knowledge base is the really tradition-specific backstory. But I know a lot about Sorcerer's Crusade because I've been reading that and running it for the last 6 months. Yeah, that's kind of my background on Mage. And I'm really fascinated, like Jacob said, about how Mage shows up in pop culture. Mage is kind of different from the other games, and that all the other games have a genre. You can go outside the genre. You can do like weird noir vampire, and it works. But vampire has kind of a genre that it tends to invoke, and so
Yeah.
does Wolf and Changeling and Wraith.
Didn't I see
May-
somebody post in the OWD group something about the librarians had a very mage feel to it?
The Librarians has a very specific type of mage feel to it, but like Mr. Robot, we were talking about
Yeah.
that before, has an incredibly mage feel to it if you're talking Syndicate and Virtual Adepts.
Yeah.
Adventure
Or even
Time.
technocracy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, Syndicate's
Evil
technoc-
Court, man, that's technocracy all day long.
Absolutely. I mean, Lucy is very mage. Adjustment Bureau is very mage. What was that show? Like every urban fantasy spell slinging thing ever is very mage. The thing about mage is there's no genre. Like it's every genre.
Yeah.
Every Space Marine story is a Void Engineer Chronicle waiting to happen. Every gangster movie is like a 50s all syndicate game waiting to happen. So, and I'm really fascinated by that. Because I think Mage has really universal human themes. Like, ultimately, mages are just superhuman. And not like superhuman like Superman. They're just like humanity in its hubris and its arrogance and its power distilled into like this perfect form. You're not playing like an archetype of rage or an archetype of hunger or an archetype of wonder. You're playing an archetype of human. And I find that really fascinating.
Carl, did you have any comments about that?
If we just summed up, here's the thing, Victor, damn you. You came in and you just said all the things I wanted to say for the most part about it.
All right.
Okay, and another thing, damn you for playing Sorcerer's Crusade, you lucky bastard. With the Order of Reason and stuff.
I loves me some Daedalans.
I'm pifting you. But to get into things, Mage. I've been playing Mage continuously for like 2 years now in different chronicles, and I've not been running Mage. I don't think I should be running Mage, therefore I'm not. I do way too much crazy shit as a mage. Like I don't think I've told any of you the story about the meat satellite, but it will come up. It will come up. But
Discording paradox, right?
I found a way around. Anyway. But what's the thing about Mage? Like the different Mage games I've been playing in. I've been playing in, a Power Crops Mage game where essentially we didn't actually use any experience points, and because we had this like MacGuffin inside of us, so we all just rapidly got spheres and everything without actually earning it. And that was a game where we all turned into selfish dicks because we all got power way too quickly and stuff. And I was playing, and I was playing in a street level Mage game, which is just like playing, street level Mage, where you don't, while you still have all that power and mages encounter a lot of weird shit, you don't really get into the big stuff, and you still have to deal with day-to-day issues. Like, it's not as easy for mages to handle parking tickets as it is for a vampire who can just dominate his way out of it.
That's true.
Unless you have enough mind to actually convince them, and even then you have 3 dice to do this, and you have to, at the low level you have to get out your wand and shit, and or build an invention depending on you get. So that's you can go a lot of interesting direction there. I'm now playing an Urban Arcana Mage game where we're exploring all the weirdness in the city, and I'm playing a chorister for the first time. And I'm utter pacifist. That's the first time I've ever gone that direction. Not to say I had 2 characters previously, but one of them died because, in my infinite wisdom, I decided to take the enemy tree flaw.
Oh.
Because that's going to end well. And
of course.
And it was like, oh, what kind of enemy do you want? And I was like, I did, because in the previous Chronicle someone had a vampire as an enemy. I was like, I don't want to steal their thunder. I want a psychic because my thought was I don't want any kind of like social enemy that's just going to undermine the group and shit, because that was. But problem is, I said it's going to be more Magneto than Professor X. Still, thing is, with when you have a psychic of that level, it still can mindfuck people. So it did that. And I died, mostly due to my own mistakes, because like he was pestering me Like at one point, he levitated and super boiled soup and tossed it at my character's crotch. Yeah, he couldn't sense him, and it, burned off everything. And at one point he brainwashed the Bernie Akashic woman who could kick ass. And she came over and she told my guy his entire thing was he divorced himself from mortal life and money and shit to just be a pure mage. And she was like, oh, he is taking part in underground pit fight fixing. I can't do this. So I can't let him do this. So she beats the shit out of my character. And my character, in his infinite wisdom, is like, I don't know who the fuck sent you. Go kill them. So I put the impulse in her head to go and kill whoever sent her.
Oh no!
Oh my god!
And that was a psychic, and she went to try and kill him, and he just, you don't want to kill me anymore. Oh, by the way, he did that to you, and she was like, fuck that guy. And then I got kicked out of the cabal. Yeah, and then I got kicked out of the cabal. And that's how I lost that character. He mind raped me into a vegetable and then killed me eventually. And then I made the Son of Ether. And the thing is, I had to retire a character because I creeped people out of character too much about it, and I didn't feel comfortable playing him because I had the goal. You see, the goal of the meat satellite, a big glorious construct, and I will get into that later. And now I'm playing this pacifist guy who is nice and wonderful, and he gives hugs and friendship to people, and I'm so disgusted every single second I'm doing it, but it's still great.
Oh, sometimes it's good to play a character like that. Like, sometimes it's good to be like, I'm going to go as far outside of my, what I play as possible.
Yep.
So,
that can take some serious effort to try and go outside the sphere of influence that character would normally have.
Well, and especially with Mage, it's kind of fun because you're building... It's not just a stat sheet and kind of a backstory and motivations. You're building a whole belief system, and it's driving how you set up your magic and exactly what you can do with the spheres. And so that's a really interesting exercise. Going way outside of your comfort zone in Mage is kind of that's an extra leap.
Oh yeah, the thing is, I have this belief about going outside of the comfort zones when you make in role-playing games in general, is that when you put more effort into it, it actually turns out better. Because if you make characters that you're just comfortable with, you can half-ass it very easily. I call this the Tremere problem. All my Tremere characters ever have all been half-assed. They wear suits, and they are they teach at university. They are at university. And they're scholar people, and they have occult tree, and that was it. And that's why, as I said, I call it the Tremere problem. The Tremere are not that in the modern day, and they're not necessarily the easiest people to shop for, so to speak.
That's true. And I mean, my character, my Archon, is, I mean, he has some minor thaumaturgy. It's 1 or 2 dots, but everything else is completely physical, firearms, stuff like that, which is way out of the sphere of influence as far as Tremere are concerned. You don't have them running the streets killing Sabat on whim.
No.
or massacring masquerade violators. That's why I did what I did with him. I didn't want to be your standard arrogant scheming mage. It just wasn't what I was after.
But yet for Mage, that was the Tremere, and they got rid of them centuries ago. Mages aren't necessarily that level of scheming by stereotype. I mean, there's plenty of schemers. There's plenty of schemers in Mage, but especially when people want to try to crazy things like meat satellites, I'm sure that involves a lot of scheming too. But it's I like what Victor had said earlier about how that Mage is all about human archetypes.
It is,
and that really that comment actually really echoed with me, just because I don't have a lot of experience with Mage, but something that I always found awkward was the fact that, to me, a lot of people were doing Mage to kind of be power hungry, crazy mortals, and not necessarily the fact that, no, these are we're talking about actual battles of beliefs. Like this is, and I think maybe even now, as much as in the 90s, it's that much more important that we talk about how much humanity and our beliefs really do affect and structure the world around us. We can see that in our politics. We can see that in our nations. If we put too much focus in believing the wrong things, it leads us in a bad direction. And Mage definitely has that in spades.
Sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was saying, I definitely agree. The thing is, like, a lot of people can be turned off Mage because what you often hear about are the crazy things people have done or the power level. But, as Victor eloquently put it, is, you're playing the archetype of humanity. Like, that's that's where the real strength of Mage, in a lot of instances, come from, is that you play people. Power, superhuman people, but still people, and that reflection of, as you mentioned, beliefs is, of course, the centerpiece of the conflict in Mage. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's a thing people does not necessarily often focus on because they hear about meat satellites and they're like, oh, that's campy, and I'm like, but there's an explanation behind the meat satellite, but meat satellites.
Yeah. Well, and I mean that goes back to the whole like. Well, two big things. The genre thing, like with the meat satellite, it's like, okay, but like camp and pulp specifically is a big part of Mage. It draws a lot from conspiracy theories and pulp. And again, those are kind of like quintessential distillation of humanity genres. If you want to call conspiracy theory a genre, it kind of is. I mean, conspiracy theories are some of the most imaginative fiction I've ever read, but then you finish it and you're like, oh, someone believes this.
What do you mean fiction? What do you mean fiction? I thought that everyone knew that Obama was totally a secret Muslim infiltrator, lizard man.
Oh,
yes.
True story.
From the center of the earth and the dark side moon base. Yeah, all of that.
Just as an FYI, we're going to go off tangent here just real quick. You do know that they crowdfunded and have finished filming Iron Sky 2.
Yes. Oh, I cannot wait.
I cannot. I love that movie. It's so awesome.
Oh, it's so terrible in all the best ways.
Yes.
But yes,
sorry, that was me. You mentioned it. I had to bring it up.
No, that's totally fine. But the other flip side that gets to like the crazy things that mages do is Mage is interesting because it's the only World of Darkness game, I think, in either version of the World of Darkness with no morality trait. There's no banality. There's no rage. I mean, rage is kind of a resource, but it's kind of also a morality trait. There's no humanity or angst, and that's
you're right. There isn't. They don't have a beast that they have to fight against,
and that's on purpose. I mean, like,
but I think Paradox is supposed to balance that out.
But Paradox isn't I mean, it isn't a morality. It's just
throwing a fireball in Times Square gets you some problems.
Yeah. Well,
it's more the correcting the stupid shit button than it is the morality button, because you can do a lot of coincidental, subtle, evil as fuck shit, but there's a lot of good acts that Paradox will punish you for, like trying to bring someone back from the dead.
Yeah. And it also depends on, the thing with Paradox is you can get out of Paradox if you really want to. You can be like, I'm going to go to the spirit world and live in the spirit world forever. No Paradox for me.
Or you have to leave occasionally, but because
well, that's a revised thing. I mean, if you want to use that, that wasn't in the original game.
Revised. The revised, the evil game, the evil setting.
I want to bring up something here. So, there's one of the orders that doesn't get brought up very often. Now, I did last Mage show, but we kind of glossed over it. The Cult of Ecstasy.
Oh.
They get brought up a lot.
The concept of getting stoned and stopping time, I love.
Yeah.
The Cult of Ecstasy is so much more than that. There are every tantric
Yeah, there's
thing.
orgies too.
Yeah,
Jeez.
well, okay,
Orgies
there's
too.
that.
Oh, there are orgies too. But
There's-
do you want
about
to take
LARP.
this, Victor, or do you want me? You can go
Yeah.
first.
I mean, yeah. I mean, basically just what you just said. There's so much more to them. Like the idea of time did come from early conversations with people about like dropping acid and what that does to time, and So I mean, that is where that inspiration came from. But like when you read, I want to say Seers of Kronos, Cult of Ecstasy. When you read the Cult of Ecstasy tradition book, they really go into the broader idea of enlightenment through experience. And there are chefs who never do drugs who are members of the Cult of Ecstasy. And, it's just so broad.
But they're not all hedonists either.
No, there's some of them starve themselves because that's an experience, and
ascetics.
pushing boundaries and stuff. Ascetics. I forgot the English word for it. So, but yeah, there's a lot of different things there, and the thing is like you can never make a new first impression, and that's I think that's a big problem of the Cult of Ecstasy is that while I call it the Ravnos problem is that while there's more to them, outside of the tradition book, it's not good at presenting that. So people are just going to get hanged up on the drugs, sex, and rock and roll and hippie aspect that often come up because that's the easiest one.
The Ravnos don't do magic.
The Ravnos problem, come in a different sense, is that the
He was
Ravnos
talking about, first
I
impressions.
was about to say, the only magic they do is hey, I
The
can
only
do magic. Is this
the only
your
magic
card?
the only magic the Ravnos do is that they avoid they somehow have not been the subject of a lawsuit yet. That's their magic. But the thing about the Ravnos is that when they were made back in the day, and just in the 90s, they were college kids. They didn't have that much source material info. And they were just like, let's make gypsy vampires or gypsies. And then they were like, oh god, this is racist.
During at the party on Saturday, I mentioned on a few shows that I've been trying to convert the local gaming group here from D&D to World of Darkness, and that was the one. Dude wants to play a ravenous vampire, and I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I get all of you want to play vampires, but I'm trying to do a cross game here. Y'all need to get your shit together. I want at least one mage. Come on, somebody. So, how...
Yeah, but yeah, I guess you're right, Carl, is that people's impressions, they kind of tend to gloss over and write off based on first impressions with the Cult of Ecstasy. And... but I think there's a lot of things in Mage that do that too, because like the sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a second.
It happens.
The other thing.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
sorry. I was just going to say the funny thing about the first impression thing. One of the things that stands out to me the most in Mage, and I'll occasionally just like go off on people online about this, is the Society of Ether, Sons of Ether, has somehow gotten around that you don't get a second chance at a first impression because somehow they wiped away their entire first edition history and got a new first impression as being about steampunk. And everyone's like, oh, steampunk, the Aetherites, steampunk. And it's like,
Not all
guys, no, but, well, not at all. Like, if you go back to first and even most of second edition, there was no steampunk at all. They were 50s pulp. They were 50s science pulp.
Noir.
And then somebody noticed, like, steampunk got big in the goth subculture, and everyone started treating the Order of Hermes, or not the Order of Hermes, sorry, the Sons of Ether, Society of Ether now, like they were still the Electrodyne engineers. And it was like, what? And as much as the art is breathtakingly gorgeous, their portrait in M20 didn't help that.
I haven't seen it.
It's beautiful steampunk.
It's beautiful steampunk. Here's the thing. To me, I never really know. I didn't notice the steampunk when I read about the Aether originally, but I know what you're referring to. To me, the Aether has always been about, yeah, as you mentioned, science pop. They're just science free of restraints, just
Yep.
going at it. Science. They are not conformed to the standard rules as the technocracy, for the most part, are. Like, they are the people who are like, why is it? Why they're just like, is space really a vacuum? I don't believe this.
Exactly.
That was not an accidental example either. That's
Yeah.
why they left. But that's the sort of thing, like, they just disprove basic theories of science, or not disprove, but dismiss often. Not necessarily, but they can just outright be like, okay, you know what, gravity? It's a piece of shit. I believe in this. And being like, that's obviously
It's a suggestion.
Is a suggestion created by the the technocracy to keep the man down and to not have us properly explore science because they want us to be conformists. Right?
Now that you mention it, the Matrix sounds like it could be very Mage too.
Matrix is virtual adepts in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and I mean, honestly, the Matrix was pulled from Mage. Like, let's just call it what it is. Like, the Matrix was inspired by early Mage, and like I forget. I think I've seen somewhere like they actually trace some of the people who were involved with the Matrix, and like they probably had played some Mage. There was some strong inspiration there.
Well, Morpheus mentions it in the training program. He says this is a system based on rules. Some of those rules can be bent, others broken.
Mm-hmm.
That's Mage.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And the wiser you become, the more you realize all the rules can be broken.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, and that's the other funny thing about Mage is the only game where a slice of what they have in there as supernatural systems works in the real world. Not all of it. You're not going to summon fireballs and demons and dragons and whatnot, but a lot of the stuff in the technocracy, a lot of like syndicate procedures and NWO procedures are things that people do in the real world. I mean, not all of it is crazy hyper science. Some of it is just like, yeah, okay, I was a business major for a while. That's a thing. That is a thing.
Well, the VA guys, the virtual adept, all their magic's online. How do you tell what isn't, say, writing a rule, rewriting the system rules as a hacker, as opposed to just saying, okay, fine, I summoned an online daemon?
Well, I mean, I would say the virtual adepts especially get into some weird, like, technosis, web spirit stuff that is definitely some nice, like, technomantic urban fantasy. But some of it is completely valid real world stuff as well, So it's interesting, and it's interesting in that a lot of it is stuff that people don't see, like it, especially with the business, the way things work, the way like, oh, this is the way society defines this, and I'm limited by that because I just accept it. And you play Mage for a while, and you're like, well, what if I just don't accept that definition anymore? And you don't get to ignore that the thing exists, but you start seeing other options of the way to interact with power structures, voting structures, the way you move through the world. And if you get Mage 20 in the back, there's this long list of testimonials from people who played the game and how it changed their life. And it's never spelled out quite this specifically, but Mage is interesting in that it seems to have really resonated in that way with a lot of people who've played it. There are more people that talk about it changing the way they live their life than, I mean, you hear an occasional story about that with role-playing in general, but not like with Mage.
Yeah, no, it sounds like... And that's the other thing about Mage, as I've noticed, is that it does seem to resonate with people even more so than Vampire or Werewolf.
Because Mage is a big philosophical game about humanity, so it's more easy that it does that. I often said this, I will defend this statement to the day I die, is that Mage is the smartest of all of all the World of Darkness games in terms of how it's written. It's the most clever game, and
Totally.
as an historian, I see a lot of stuff in the real world. I just can trace it to Mage instantly. For example, I'm using this example often. Is back in the day, people actually believed that basilisks and dragons and shit were real. Like, that was a commonly accepted fact. There was a fucking bestiary, like a scientific for its day, like a recognized bestiary where this was like, yeah, this is how dragons are, and this is what they look like and stuff. And in Mage, you can just go by that's actually true. Those things were around, but the technocracy turned the consensus, against them, so to speak.
Some of them require belief to exist, and if you can change the belief structure of the majority of the population, then these things will cease to exist.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
That's the same thing with Leonardo da Vinci and his, his designs for like tanks and helicopters and stuff. You who play, who run Sorcerer's Crusade know what I'm talking about here. That's vulgar then. But now people are like, oh, but they would have worked. They just didn't have enough research material. I know they're not resources and stuff. And that's just a way that's just the technocracy being like, that it didn't work there because, consensual reality. Now it works because we have rewritten the consensus to the degree that it would. So,
yeah. Well, and that actually gets into another really weird concept in Mage that I find I used to have trouble with this. It took me a long time to wrap my head around this, and it's the first thing I have to get new players through is playing mages that don't know they're using magic. And it's mostly a technocracy issue. If you really get into it, if you're an orphan, you maybe know you're doing magic, but you don't really know the scope of what that means until you meet other mages. But they really line it out in the Order of Reason book, where if you have Arete 1 through 3, you do not believe in magic. Magic is not a thing. You just believe you're really good at reading facial expressions.
Okay.
And
because everything's coincidental, right? Like, it's...
They have to, in the Order of Reason book, that's actually true. They can, until you get Arete 4, a Daedalus, that's the term for the Order of Reason members, you can't use any vulgar magic or science in this case. Not possible.
Yeah, you can't.
You can't, because in their case it's a case of self-delusion. Like all the that's the big thing of Mage is that all paradigms are true and bullshit at the same time. That's the same with the science. Science
that's a little hard to wrap one's head around, to be honest.
Yeah, but that is hard. But here's the thing: science works because we accept that it works. But the thing is, and the same is with all the I just remember magic, praying, some may just pray, courses and stuff. But all of that's just bullshit. The only thing you're actually doing is that you're willing this to happen, and you're coming up with an explanation to justify how this works.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
And that's always hard to wrap your head around. But that's a thing. That's welcome to Mage. The smartest things.
Well, and even in the real world, we're starting to see more and more, research around things like meditation, where they're not, the researchers aren't touching on the spiritual aspect of meditation, but they're just if you sit alone in perfect silence and don't try to control your thoughts and basically meditate, oh, look, you regrow nerves. Oh, look, it changes these serotonin levels. Oh, look, it has this impact on PTSD symptoms. And, that is, in Mage terms, a technocratic encoding of mystical practice. But both those paradigms are true. All of that technocratic encoding is a way of describing a thing that is true, that now they're totally okay with people doing because it's part of the timeline. Yeah, sure, it's fine. But it's also what the Akashics say is true. If you go and you learn from an Akashic and you perform perform their practices in meditation, you will get those benefits. Do you get those benefits because it's really science? Do you get those benefits because they're right? These are struggles that absolutely happen in the real world. And all roads do lead to, insert religious monolith of your choice here.
There are stories about monks using meditation to do some pretty fantastic shit. One story I remember hearing about is a monk would go out in a snowstorm, strip naked, and sit down in the snow and melt all of the snow around them, and never even think about frostbite, much less actually getting it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting aspect of the Mage license is they're called sorcerers, and they use what's called static magic because as much as the technocracy would like to think that science rules supreme, people all over the world, people believe in magic and mysticism and stuff and spiritualism and all that jazz. And there are leeways in the consensus, so to speak, that allows this to be a thing, like meditation, for example. There's the technocracy have just can't get rid of this. We're just encoding it with science.
Yep.
That's same thing there. That's why sorcerers exist, because sorcerers are kind of like the loophole in reality, because they don't get punished with paradox because they can use magic. They can't openly just shoot a fireball out of their armpit. Like they have to do it like in a long ritual thing, and the fireball comes and it comes in a coincidental manner and stuff.
Like a lot of thaumaturgy. There's a lot of
thought
involved there.
Although what's fun, and I don't know exactly what book they introduced it in, there are technocratic sorcerers as well. They're called, I'm gonna pick the wrong word, not exceptional, extraordinary citizens, where it's basically the technocratic version of that loophole. But the weird thing about that is certain extraordinary citizens are rising up without being sort of cultivated by the technocracy. And so sleepers, they're technically still sleepers, are manifesting and accomplishing all of these things, totally using technocratic paradigm, but that throw the plans of control and the timeline way off the course they want it to be on. So you get this really interesting, like, they're kind of their own enemy, like how do they control the ramifications of their own actions kind of thing going on. So, yeah, it's interesting how that works on both sides of the conflict.
Yep. It just is it's a thing. That's what, as you mentioned, extraordinary citizens are, the sorcerers and technocratic sorcerers, and they're very interesting by themselves as player characters too. Actually, Mage produced that, and they have there's more room to do stuff with them than with ghouls and kinfolk for vampire and werewolf, respectively. Bias or win, but anyway.
How do sorcerers fit in? So how do sorcerers fit in with the fact that they don't worry about paradox or anything like that? So I understand that they're using static rotes, but how does their process impact the conflict on belief that you see between the different mage followings?
The thing is that if they have an impact, like sorcerers generally deal like their own sorcerer groups and stuff, but sorcerers, if anything, are often just like the low end of the ranking. In Mage, for example, Order of Hermes, being a sorcerer is a part of the training regimen. Like that was like a 3-step thing, where you're first like learning lots of Arabic and Latin and shit, and then you learn basic sorcery magic. And then you learn the advanced version of that, and then you're supposed to awaken. That's their formula. It's not perfect. If there was a perfect formula for awakening, then whoever side had that
would do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and everyone does awakening differently. Yeah. I mean, it also really depends. So, like in the world, it depends on the type of sorcerer you are. Sort of from the game design standpoint, it kind of depends on which Future Fate edition you're running. So, if you've looked at Mage 20, and for any of the listeners, if you have or haven't looked at Mage 20, throughout the whole book, there are all these future fates. And basically what they boil down to is, after 2nd edition, when Revised came out, they dramatically changed the whole design of the game. The themes, the intent, they made huge changes to it. It's incredibly divisive, because on one hand, it brought in a whole new round of players, which is awesome. It's honestly, that shift is a big part of why the game has such a large player base now. Because you have all the people who like the 2nd edition sort of philosophy and all the people who like the revised philosophy, and they kind of all bought Mage 20. But then, like, they completely changed sorcerers. In the 1st edition sorcerer book, sorcerers were sometimes associated with traditions, but were really kind of their own thing.
Yeah.
And then in Revised, they were much more part of the traditions, and they wrote a new book that framed them that way, and it was much more part of the Mage line. So it really depends on which version you're running with.
Yeah, it's the thing, like, as I said, it's a edition thing. I prefer the second edition variant personally because it's better written.
It really is.
Because it's a case study. The revised book about sorcerers is just like, okay, we press sorcerers here. We get psychics in here too for some reason. Not the same at all, but still. Let's do it. And instead of being creative and trying to build the sorcerers as their own thing, let's just make them all like, they're all just vanilla members of the traditions or conventions or whatever.
Yeah, and I mean it's weird, like trying to navigate, like now when you play Mage, deciding, well, what is the Mage I'm playing is its own whole pregame. Like, I know people were like, I love these two things from Revised, but the rest of Revised is garbage. So it's like second edition except for these two things. Or people who are like, I hate the Avatar Storm, but I also hate the whole Nefandia running everything story. So toss it up in the air, and what am I taking? Like, it's weird.
I mean, how dare you say that the Nefandia are running everything? I think that they would be benevolent rulers of the universe, and it's not like they want to utterly destroy reality down to its last strand.
So tell me about your time in the calls.
Yes.
No. I just feel that you are too quick to dismiss them. Is all I'm just saying.
You also say the BSD are the true warriors of Gaia, right?
I mean, the BSD have just realized that the apocalypse happened. And it's done. And the war
sideways quick, didn't it?
I mean, I think the BSD are upstanding members of the community, as are the Bali. The Bali are the true way for vampires.
Hey, don't drag us through the mud. Leave us alone.
Okay, to be honest, the Bali are anti-heroes and not villains.
And the Fomorians just wanted to have tea, and Gorul is super misunderstood.
Right?
Yeah.
Yep,
Right?
all these things.
Anyhow.
All these things. But it's a great twist of the old World of Darkness.
What kind of show is this, anyway?
All the antagonists turn out to be right, to some extent.
Kinda.
It's a thing, like the Sabata rights and, the technocracy actually started out with the best intentions, while the mages were elitist dicks. There is a cat approaching me for some reason. But, and the werewolves turn out that they actually fucked over the entire universe because they are arrogant racist dicks, and race.
Yeah, well, that's my feeling anyway.
That's just like all the games. Like in Wraith, you're actually a bug in the universe, and you actually aren't supposed to be a thing. After what I remember,
Oh.
Yeah, but like you're supposed.
Come on, Victor.
Carl's trying to get us to talk about everything tonight, isn't he?
Yeah,
He's
I'm dragging you through it. But anyway,
how badly can we derail this topic?
I know. Well,
I mean, I once managed to derail an entire chronicle into being about my cannibalistic dog worshipping vigilante cult in Mage.
Well, and I mean, to be totally fair, Mage is the game that intersects all the other games. Like, Wraith can't interact with anybody. That Euthanatoy can walk into the Shadowlands. Like, I mean, nobody can see the changelings. Well, I've got just the right spheres. Mage, like, I once ran a 3.5 year long Mage apocalypse game, and instead of doing any of the Ascension scenarios, because
that's boring.
Not a fan. I actually went through the apocalypse scenarios for all of the other supernaturals, and the mages had to live through like the magic and like the structure of the world slowly unmaking itself as it all came back around to them and the pure ones being the source of everything, and having to make, choices about, is this gonna recycle positively, or are we just gonna, swirl down this shithole the same way again next time? And that being what the campaign was about. Like, that works for Mage, because mages, give them a few first level spheres and like half an hour to do a few rolls and some analysis, and they can more or less figure out exactly what they're looking at. Like, you throw a vampire who doesn't have necromancy into a haunted house, and they're like, they're just gonna shrug and you go, Group of
Vampires never really
mages, like.
the thing is, Mage is the only game where you actually where the general culture about Mage really cares about how something works and why something is a thing. Vampires are kind of like, oh, mages are just such nerds. We don't care. We just it's a thing. That's it.
No,
That's
the
really
Khmer know mages are devastatingly nasty, and we don't like it.
Yeah, vampire for me are the one exception. But beyond that, vampires generally aren't that big onto like, oh, how does this work?
Yeah,
You know, and I don't know if any of you have read the new Black Handbook, but they have once again Foundations. High five.
Yeah,
I'm high-fiving.
High five. I am the new Talmara book is so good, and mummies and pillars and foundations and
just explain. In Dark Ages Mage, they didn't have the classical arete system of magic with the 9 spheres and arete, but you have like what was called fellowships, which were basically the traditions.
Were there rings involved? That's what I.
There weren't rings
No.
necessarily, but there could be. There could be rings, and I mean, it's a thing. But the magic system there is based on something called foundations and pillars, which is the different teachings of those traditions. Like the Order of Hermes had I don't remember the name. It's essentially based around their scholarly, logical, hermetic approach. And then you have the spirit talkers, where you have 4 pillars and 1 foundation. You roll, and instead of rolling 1 stat now, you roll foundation and pillar to do magic and stuff. And it's really cool because it's like custom made spheres for each tradition based on their point of view. And they reintroduced this in the Telmaira book with faction of mages called the Itarayana, who are necromancers, who are basically the bitches of the Telmaira.
Yeah,
and
pretty
it's
much.
really cool. And it's really cool. I actually home wrote a foundation and pillar system because I thought when I was I've been looking at Mage, and the one archetype I don't think is properly represented in Mage is the old sorcerer king thing, like pharaohs and Babylonian priest kings and stuff. And that's what I decided to make a tradition Gilgamesh. I actually
Solomon.
Solomon.
Yeah, Solomon.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Melchizedek.
And it's not, and you can present that with any mage if you want to try to make an ambitious mage, but there's no paradigm based on it. There's a paradigm, but it's not any group that's dedicated to it. And I was like, I have free time, and now that I know that foundations and pillars still can exist in a modern day, I will just write this.
Well,
so I made that.
There actually kind of is one group based on that concept. The Toftani are kind of based on that concept. I mean,
Toftani are kind of the classical Arabian mages with flying carpets and shit, though.
You're picking up a very specific cultural context, but that whole we are kings, we are entitled to this, screw your coincidental magic. We're going to be as vulgar as we possibly can.
And flying around on a carpet's pretty fucking vulgar. I'm just saying.
They do way more vulgar shit than that because their entire culture is based around out-vulgaring each other.
Yeah, it really is.
They're essentially suicidal because they're like, well, you know what? Fuck you. I'm going to do all the vulgar magic I want to because that's I'm pushing boundaries, damn it. And and you have the ecstatics over there being like, oh, we're pushing boundaries. No, you're not, pansies. No. We are burning our arms off for this because we are men.
And I mean, and the one thing that is, so they did 2 things with the Toftani, one in their original write-up, one in the new write-up that I think is pretty cool. The Toftani are all about carving slices of reality, almost like sanctums out of the real world. So they will create a swath of their own consensus out in the desert where common consensus can't reach, but they don't do it out in the spirit world. It's important to them that it be part of this world, so you can do stories about poor unfortunate mortals wandering into those reality zones. And that's how they keep from completely committing suicide as an order. But then in the modern era, they have finally, like in M20, and they did this with a lot of the disparates, they're finally having to adapt. So it's still like the high, vulgar, crazy magic, but because they've cycled through so many people, because they burn out so quickly, now they work techno magic. Like in addition to their old high Solomonic magic, they also are playing with like really outrageous techno magic, which is something that, I mean, it kind of had a place in previous editions of Mage, but not, it wasn't well developed. Like you had the virtual adepts that were like, or the Society of Ether, where it was like pulp or super hacker kind of little magic-y, but just
I'll speak for the win.
yeah, I mean, but like that's a subgroup of a tradition. You have to dive into some supplemental material to get there. Like having it right there in the core book, and it's there in a couple disparate groups now, and a little bit in the modern tradition rewrites. I like having it front and center.
They've pushed that more into front and center. You're correct about that. And I think there was a little mention of House Tig in the Rise in the core book, but not really. Like it's not a real mentioning. But yeah, like they've done a lot of interesting, stuff in M20. Like they've removed a lot of the '90s problems, like the Hollow Ones. Hollow Ones. Let's talk. We mentioned never making a new first impression. The Hollow Ones. I know goth culture is still an alive thing, but it's not that big as it was in the '80s and '90s.
No, it isn't.
No, it should have been like, and they kind of re-envision more like the disenfranchised youths that are more like hipsters now, but they still have the whole goth thing like aesthetic going for them to some extent, and that's a problem they've had. And the virtual adepts used to be very hackers, the movie, and that had its own share of problems. But they've done a lot of work to improve that with with the M20 book is to make it more timeless. Because if there's ever been a flaw with the old World of Darkness, is it's too dated in a lot of ways.
That was one of the things I was going to mention. Is I'm hoping that with the new editions, the V20 stuff, is that they are updating all of it, not just. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say they in Mage 20 they definitely updated everything. And not everybody loves all the changes, but I think on the whole it was a big improvement. The Hollow Ones, yeah.
Hollow Ones for first example. But the M20 book had problems. Oh, you have only 3 merits now. You can wait for the Book of Secrets and then you can get the rest of the merits.
I mean, for me though, that's a temporary problem. Like that's not a.
But that's kind of like it's a little bit douchey, Like okay, here's this big book filled with all of this wonderful stuff, but an essential part of creating characters is having like the merits and flaws up to date. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I have mixed feelings on that because so many of the merits and flaws are universal. Like, so many of the merits and flaws, you can pull out Werewolf 20 or Vampire 20 without any real trouble. I
agree. But there's some you should pull out from, like, the Ghoul merit we need to talk about. Because revised, you took a 5-point merit. And made it essentially Dark Fate. Because wonderful piece of game design here. Like, I'm just going to gauge your guys' opinion. Let's say you make a mage character. I want him to be a ghoul. That's one interesting thing. He's going to be an independent ghoul because that's the part of the merit. But still, I have to have that, struggle and getting vampire blood and have to deal with the addiction and all that stuff. It's going to be
ghoul mages are some of the most devastating things ever.
Yeah, for their very brief lives.
But and then they're like, that would be interesting. I'm going to do that. 5 merit points. It's expensive, but it's worth it. So you do that. And then a book called Blood Treachery comes out. A wonderful book where the Tremere somehow beats the other purpose.
It's honestly, it's the best revised book. The best.
It is good.
The best one. It is the best revised book by far because somehow the Tremere managed to beat the Order of Hermes in a straight-up fight.
How the hell
people that can create mini neutron stars.
Yeah.
The Tremere beat them. And beat them handedly. Like, Grimgoth comes in and just tosses around highest ranking hermetics like they're nothing. Like he just comes in and his movement optimizes them all, and like he breaks through all of their magical defenses, and it's so bad. It's so bad. But there they introduced the whole thing of if you become a mage ghoul. For one thing, you can barely use any of the disciplines for some reason, but whatever. Now, if you learn them, here's the thing: your ghouldom, your 5-point merit, is actually destroying your avatar. So you're going to lose points in the avatar background until you have 0, and then it's going to start destroying your avatar over time. And you're going to get massive static and entropotic resonance from this already. That was already a problem. And Banes and shit and the Foundy and stuff are going to be hyper aware of you. So they took a 5-point merit and essentially made it Dark Fate.
And
my question is, why do you want to play a Ghoul Mage so much? You can be a mage who's an addict without having to be addicted to vampire blood.
Oh, I've never actually really wanted to play a Ghoul Mage personally, but it's the thing about game design where if you don't want to encourage crossing streams, then just say because of the avatar it doesn't work, it just rejects it. You can easily say that.
But I think what's in Blood Treachery is way more interesting. Because here's the thing, before Blood Treachery, I would never play a Ghoul Mage as a player because it's cheap. As a storyteller, I would never let anyone take that merit. It'd be like, I'm going to spend 5 points on no, you're not.
No, you're not.
No,
right?
You're not. Not at this table, you're not. After Blood Treachery, if someone walked up to me and they were like, so I read Blood Treachery and I totally want to play a Ghoul Mage because I want to play that Glorious Descent and I have a respect for narrative and I am fine knowing that like 4 months from now I'm going to be dead, but that's going to be 4 months of the most intense gaming of my life. I'd be like, you do that and you are going to be stupid powerful for 4 months and then you're going to die.
Have you actually seen the new Have you seen the new Tell Me Ira book? Because they fixed the Gold Mage rules again.
What do you mean?
They removed here's the thing. They just made it so that if when you're a Gold Mage, you can't advance your Arete/Foundation rating. So you have to kind of like fast yourself to learn to increase your power as a mage, but you don't destroy yourself over it.
Okay, but and I have to say this: that book did not get input from the Mage developer. I view that book as super awesome optional canon and magnificent fodder for a vampire game. I would never use those rules in a Mage game, ever.
Oh, that's fine. It's just a thing. I personally actually like to not make a 5-point merit Dark Fate.
Well, I mentioned this
I'm often
as
a
one of my
narrative
nukes
person.
back in the day, and this was why when Jacob brought up the whole destruction of the avatar, if you ghoul a Cult of Ecstasy mage, you can get around the issue of the use of celerity and temporis causing final death. You use the ghouled mage to do the time stop, and then you use celerity. And I was one of the best nukes I ever came up with. You would be, some of the most devastating shit you can think of.
So the person running that game didn't compound paradox?
No. This was one of the ones I came up with on my own. It wasn't actually used in game.
Because
and is there an issue with paradox where kindred are concerned?
There's yes. It depends. Kindred on their own, their paradox flaws, because I honestly think all the supernaturals have paradox effects. Werewolves probably having the least, but like when you look at when the long sleep started to become more of a thing for vampires, it lines up with the death of magic. If you look at the death of Fae and the need to do the changeling way and be hidden by the mist, it lines up with the death of magic and mage. The same thing with the shroud advancing, with wraith. Like, they have paradox flaws. It's just because humans may not admit they believe in them, but they're secretly afraid they exist. They have like this little niche of consensus they can survive in as long as they stay there. And my view on it, and this is headcanon, but my view on it is all the supernaturals in one way or another kind of realize that's happened. And that's where the Silence of the Blood came from eventually with the Sabbat in the LARP story, I don't know if they've written that into the tabletop books, and the Masquerade and the Dictum Mortem, et cetera, et cetera. So I mean, they have some of that stuff. If you mix true magic with their abilities, they've never really given rules for that, I think, because they don't want to facilitate it. I would have some horrid paradox spirits show up if that shit happened at my table. I'd let it happen because I'm a big believer in player agency and repercussions.
Yeah.
But
Should always be a downside.
yeah,
Actually, I was actually going to mention they have actually started, with, as previously mentioned, Tell My Era book, they actually have made some rules about how true magic and, vampires can interact. Like, you can't, I think they use an example, like, if you want to help buff someone's fortitude, so to speak, you can't really do that, but you can conjure magical armor on them. But you can't. I don't remember the entire thing, but but I actually started making rules for that now. And of course it can be super optional rules if that's your desire. But there's some inspiration there if you actually want to seriously consider how that would work if that scenario ever come up.
yeah. I mean, I think those sorts of rules have. I think they make more sense in like a vampire game than they do in a mage game. I think in a mage game, and I'll borrow cross games all the time, but if I borrow something that was written, like I used the Scathach in my Sorcerer's Crusade game, and I looked at the Changeling write-up on the Scathach, and I went, wow, none of those dates line up with what I need to do, and those themes are really close to what I want, but not quite, and I'm not running a Changeling game. So inspiration done, I threw it back on the shelf, and I did what I needed to do for my game. I think anything like those rules in Talmara are written for Vampire by Vampire devs. Like one of the first things I did when I realized they had Mage stuff in there is I flipped to the credits page and I looked for Phil Bricato's name and it wasn't there. And I went, cool. And that framed how I interact with those rules. So
I think Malcolm Shepard was the one that did the Mage stuff, though, and he was a writer in Mage previously, I think. Like, not M20.
Sure. Sure, previously, but I mean, just in terms of like the current 20th edition vision for that stuff, know, and I'm not saying that it isn't valid, but in terms of like, was it written with Vampire in mind or was it written with the current design philosophy of Mage in mind? It was written with Vampire in mind, and I think they're super valid rules for a Vampire table.
And I think it's an extremely well-written Mage group for Vampire, where vampires are more in the center. I really want to play one of those because it's an interesting prospect. But and I usually despise the true backhand. But I think that actually was the best made part of the book. The best made part of the vampire book was the Mage section.
Oh yeah, I mean I'm glad that they specified some of that stuff for Vampire because I know a lot of people that like to use mages in their Vampire games because it's hard to come up with a good boogeyman in Vampire, especially once you're like a year into experience. I mean, super powerful werewolves, whatever, that's just the war front that will never go away. Changelings are footballs. They're there to be kicked around. Wraiths are kind of footballs because necromancy is so big. Like, you don't have a good boogeyman. You show up with a true mage, you got a boogeyman. Like, you have something to be afraid of. They may be a glass cannon, but you have something to be afraid of. So I love that it's there for the Vampire game. I just think pulling it into a Mage table, like, you have to consider why were these rules written? Like, what story are they written to facilitate? And yeah, I mean, in a game that doesn't focus on paradox, it doesn't focus on those sorts of repercussions, great, sure, they're valid. I would just take a lot of, like, what am I doing to power balance my players in mind? Because a lot of that gets improv'd in how you implement paradox, and make sure that it's scaled appropriately to what those rules allowed.
No, definitely. Crossovers have always sort of been the weak part, where the weakness of the World of Darkness can also be shown.
But it should be possible.
Yeah. It should be possible.
And that's been my thing all along, is that each of these systems should interlock.
That's actually the big strength of the Chronicles of Darkness, actually, New World of Darkness, is that it's better written in the terms of a system perspective when they're interlocking with each other.
That's the new. They're actually looking at that with the new systems.
Well, and they always have with New World.
Yeah, well, we don't talk about that.
Well, that's what Karl was talking about, was the new...
Yeah, that's what he was talking about. I mean,
sorry, we snuck that in there on
Damn
you,
it.
Pete.
One day I will make a believer out of you two. It will happen one day, potentially.
You know, I mean,
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
Is what, whatever. But anyway, Mage.
Yes, that's all right. We have no problem with tangents.
well,
Anyway, we're an hour in. I want to say hi to everybody in the chat. Thank you for joining us live. We appreciate you guys. We seem to have pretty much. Well, Simon was with in our last show, wasn't he, Jacob?
yeah, he was in the Changeling show.
Yeah. So welcome back, Simon, and of course Vanessa and Lexi and Sabrina. I like doing the names. That way, for posterity, we know who the hell was here.
and I think all of the people in chat should start.
I'd like to see us start seeing more questions from them people. Y'all need to get your shit together.
I want to see all of you just try some new interesting ventures with the Special Projects Division and Endron Oil, the most ethical of companies.
Yes. To Special Projects, we have things we want to test on you.
Actually, that's the Special Project Division should have been expanded more upon in Mage, in my opinion. For those that don't know, Special Project Division is a division of the syndicate that at one point, there's when a father corporation and a mother corporation love each other very much, they can create a little child corporation. This then one named Pentex, and and that would have been interesting to see having been more explored, because Pentex is one of the best antagonists in the world of Darkness.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd say about that is I don't know how much they really need to expand on it, because I know I just talked about when it's written for one game, don't use it in another, and you'd invoked the one exception I have to that rule. Pentex Guide to Subsidiaries, that's a Mage book at my table. That's a Mage book. That's Special Projects. Just go. Just pick it up and
Just go with it. Just go with it.
I mean, we all like some Pentex in our lives. We worship it.
Yeah,
we worship the Father.
Did I miss anybody? I think I got.
No, you got
chat.
everybody.
Okay.
So, do you people want to hear the story about the meat satellite before I forget about it?
I know I do.
Is this interesting?
Yeah.
Okay, I made this if right, and I wanted a big project, and I decided, what people need in life? An orbital strike. I think that one day we might need an orbital strike, and then people are, oh no, what we're going to do?
Well, isn't that how the Ravnos Antediluvian was taken out?
Yes, orbital sun mirrors. But anyway, and I was like, I'm going to be the one to provide the answer, and people will worship me as their new god, as I save the day. None of this happens. But anyway, so I wanted to build a thing, and he liked to experiment with what he called it semi-organic droids. That's why he used it for his correspondence ward thing. He placed out droids that sent out a little signal, and they were part organic material, which was really just meat, duct tape, glued, and melted together with metal. Because he didn't really have the life sphere to a degree, so he couldn't do this. I made this design. It was going to be for the meat satellite, and it was a 3-layer structure. First, you have the core, right, where all the organs are, obviously, and the computer system, and there's a little chair there, so if you ever want to teleport up there, you can do that. It's a little teleport generator and stuff, and and he won't. Anyway, that was the inner core. That was the core. Then you have the inner layer, which is meat, and all the generators for his all the just big electrical things inside of it, wrapped together, of course, and duct tape. And melted together and shit. And then you have the outside where all of the the solar panels and the generator things came out with the anti-radiation shield generator and shit, and the giant gun. And here it was obviously covered in skin. And my goal was to have a spirit mage awaken this thing's spirit. So it's going to be a sentient orbital strike satellite made out of in this unholy mix of inorganic and organic material, this horror creation.
Sounds like vicissitude gone wrong.
Yeah.
It
So
is-
how did you convince your storyteller to let you play Nefandi?
Well, the thing is that he was not going to use human meat. He was going to just buy a lot of meat over time to do this.
He didn't label himself, so his
I didn't label it myself. But the thing is, unfortunately, I never really got to put the meat satellite into life. I like to think that somewhere there's a meat satellite there, and someone will use it in a game. But I didn't get to make it, unfortunately. I talked too much about it, seeing people out. I was like, and I don't want to. And people started questioning my mental, not really questioning, but they were like, "Are you sure you should do this?" Like, from an out of character perspective, and they're like, "Okay, fine. I'm not going to build AM today, but one day the meat satellite lives on. It's like the Ravnos barony. It's the eternal dream."
Everybody has their own little thing they want to do. Like me and my gold Cult of Ecstasy mage,
Wait, your what? Cult of Ecstasy mage?
The Gould Cult of Ecstasy mage. The way
yeah.
around the issue with Celerity and Temporis.
Yes.
Listen, Ed, just type it away. Type it away.
Yeah. Victor, have you had any big projects in Mage or any big dream you've just wanted to make as a player?
Wow, that's kind of, well, as a player, kind of. So it's more like a political social thing, but the last Mage character I played, one thing that frustrates, it is one of the only holes in Mage, and it's a political hole, it's not a true paradigm hole. I hate that all the true technomancers, not like technomagic, but like unionist paradigm, we believe in science, are all bound to the Union. Like, they're all bound to the Union. You don't find, like, that disparate group that doesn't believe in magic, but is working enlightened will and disagrees with the Union. I want that so badly.
Those are going to be made.
So badly! But,
Victor, I have news for you. Coming.
Oh my!
Who's coming?
They're coming.
They're coming.
They're coming. They're
Awesome.
coming.
That's creepy.
Now, we talked about this on last show with Karl. They really need to do a better set of rules for Mage for LARPing.
Oh.
Come on now.
You're
Look,
hurting
if they're doing rules for werewolf, man,
Can
come
you hear
on.
the pain in Victor's voice?
Okay, here's the thing.
God.
I'm going to take my comrade's side here. And the thing is, the Mage is not necessarily the best game. It's hard to translate it to LARP because how big the groups of players can be in LARP and how active you need an ST around you when you're using Magic because they need to be because the player doesn't necessarily need to understand all the intricacies of Magic and shit. Because it's often it comes down to ST perception, not it's not codified. But therefore, that's why it's important to have an ST because some things that you could convince could fly as coincidental in one game would not fly in another. That's the big thing.
Yeah.
So and it's hard to do that for LARP because LARPs are big. Mm-hmm. And another thing, like writing better LARP rules. They first have to write good LARP rules for Werewolf. Now I remember looking at the V20, their W20.
The Omega Slice is out.
Yeah, the Omega.
I've read this.
posted it.
I read the Alpha Slice.
No.
Go to the Omega Slice. You can download it for free at Drive-Thru RPG.
Like,
do they still have werewolf spread by biting? Do they still have that?
that's.
That wasn't actually what they said in the first place, but that is I don't think they've changed what they had initially said, but that wasn't what they initially said either. I would encourage you to reread that section because we had a whole conversation with Jason Karl when he was on our first LARP episode, and there was a lot of misperceptions on that part of the Alpha Slice. And reading through it myself, I didn't understand, which is why I brought it up when he was on the show, because I didn't understand why there was such a big fuss because like I couldn't line it up. And so people saw something about how some Geru try to trigger the change by chasing down kinfolk and biting them, and somebody went off on a tangent and said, oh, that's it, werewolves are only spread by being bitten, this is bullshit, and had their tantrum on the internet, and the internet did what the internet does best, and that's repeat half-truths without checking facts. Then it became a whole big kerfluffle.
I love that word.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I have some friends that are playing those rules right now. They're in actually an official playtest group in Chicago, and they hated the alpha slice and the beta slice. Like I could not get them to stop complaining about the rules. Like not stuff like the bite, but the actual rules.
What about the merit that made some? That's if you run away from a get to Fenris, you take like 7 or something.
Yeah, the thing about those slices is, especially if you're talking about the alpha slice, like that's an alpha slice, and they've had a beta slice and a gamma slice and a beta, a gamma, a delta, and now they're on omega. I think omega because this is the last
one
slice.
Before they go live.
And everyone I know in this playtest who hated those early slices loves these rules. I'm going to be joining not this coming Saturday, but the Saturday after. And I've heard nothing but good stuff about how this plays and how it flows. And
you
they've
have to get a fur hat.
I am, but like they've actually captured things like cinematic action flow in a LARP system by using Mage. And I mean, that's really like they were trying something really adventurous. So of course their first attempt was going to have some flaws. Like you don't go out on a limb and get it right on first draft. So, I mean, yeah, I would say don't bring up Werewolf to talk about Mage so much, because like Werewolf, rules aside, is like an ideal LARP scenario because werewolves are super social. Vampire is an ideal LARP scenario because vampires are super social. Mages, you get like 5 mages in a room, and if you're playing them accurately, unless it's one tradition, you have a fight on your hands. Like,
even one tradition could be risky too.
Get a House Flambeau and House Seos or Teague member together, and you will see fireworks. So because, like, as you mentioned, mages, playing mage is kind of like being like when you're with your racist uncle at Thanksgiving or whatever,
right?
And the political discussion.
That is such a perfect encapsulation.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, because everyone thinks the other ones are like, oh God, they're groaning at them, and that's why the traditions never work well together, because they sit around squabbling over shit.
Yeah,
but I'm saying, why not bring a mage into a vampire or a werewolf game?
Okay, but my point about that is nobody is going to put the time and money and development effort that it takes to develop a full set of LARP rules for the one-off NPC. Like, it has to be viable as a standalone mage game. It's the same point I made about the Wraith LARP rules, which I feel very similarly about. Of the original 5 games, the only one left that I think makes a good LARP, and I listened to your Changeling game, and I'm about to disagree with Simon, and he's going to give me shit about it later. I think Changeling makes a great LARP. Like, I would think so. I played Changeling LARP, like one of my first LARPs, actually. I was still in high school, and I played Changeling before the Shining Host came out. It was right before, and our storyteller converted everything to LARP system. And it ended up being very close to what came out in Shining Host. And it played beautifully. Like, they're so social, and all the things that are necessary for a big LARP story are there. Mage does not have that. Like, the Technocracy makes terrible LARP because they don't socialize. Like, oh, the progenitors are in the lab. Oh, the iterators are on Autochthoniya. That's nice.
The only ones that could be, even then, they couldn't really work for a LARP, would be the Void Engineers, perhaps. Void Engineers are more social, but that's because they have basically made their own culture in space. Like, they have their own space stations and shit where they hang out. They're the big free spirits of the Technocracy, and that's why they almost leave. Constantly.
Almost. And then, but not. Like, the explanation for why the Void Engineers will never leave in the new Void Engineer convention book is so delicious. I read that and I went, that is awesome.
That book is also very awesome. All the new convention books that came out in 2013 were great. You should all read them.
Yes.
You should all read them, especially the Syndicate one, actually. Because the Syndicate one made a believer out of me in the Syndicate. Because the Syndicate as they were originally made, were one of the least interesting Mage groups because
I
of
agree.
the big corporate. But this book made the Syndicate interesting, and it made them really fit in Mage, which was their problem, is that how does big corporate people fit into the whole zeitgeist of this is how reality works? But they made a really good thing with them.
They really did. It was actually the first convention book I read, and I was sold. Like I had to buy all of them, and I just like absorbed them because I read that Syndicate book and the fiction in those books, the ones that came out in 2013, and especially the Syndicate book was just like I read it, and I'm like, you're doing exactly what the Syndicate has always done and what everyone hates the Syndicate for doing. And I honestly, in this moment, believe you are in the right, and that's.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Well, the thing is, you are a dirty capitalist scum that's going to be taken down by the proletariat, obviously.
Well,
that's
or
obviously.
Or a gangster. Like the other thing I love about the new Syndicate book is there's like one paragraph where they were like, yeah, gangsters, that's a thing. We like organized crime. We like to diversify our portfolio, and that's all they said about it. Because that. I love the idea of like a 1950s all gangster Syndicate Mage game, but honestly, in a general Mage game, the organized crime angle is kind of sort of maybe useful in like a Katanas and Trenchcoats game, I guess. Like,
interesting. You should
You
mention.
had to bring up Shadowrun, didn't you?
Oh no, that was what they described first edition Mage as. Katanas and trenchcoats. Like that was their like joking code term for the original Mage aesthetic.
Actually, but
there's an actual RPG out now called Katanas and
Trenchcoats. Yeah.
Is it actually out now? I thought it was just on Kickstarter.
Yeah, they had a Kickstarter a few months ago. I guess maybe it might not be done yet, but it's on its way.
I was considering getting it, but what I was going to say. Funny you should mention that. The next Mage game I'm going to play in is going to be Ascension War game, where we are actually going to play members of the mob. It's going to be great.
Awesome. See, and if you center it on that, I think it's a super interesting plot hook as like a whole idea for a convention that you in theory want to interact with the rest of the technocracy. I always thought it was a little awkward. It's funny. It gets more play in the Progenitor book than it gets in the Syndicate book. Like, in the Progenitor book, they deal with, we're still making drugs for the Syndicate to sell in the black market. Like, the Syndicate as the black market has more word count in the Progenitor book than it does in the Syndicate book, which kind of tells you about, like, how well it helps frame Syndicate characters.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the Syndicate convention book is, like, on my top 5-10 Mage book you should read, because like as they're described, like they are the ones that East just like they're just greedy corporate dicks. They're the Ventrue, like they're the boring Ventrue of the Mage. You always need one of those. you always need one of those, like the boring corporate Ventrue that's just money. But you know that there's so much more than that, and it's really great. Well.
So actually, this made me think of this. You asked me earlier if I have any big project in Mage I ever want to do. Just once in a modern Mage game, I want to get a bunch of tradition players into a position where they've hacked like a technocracy server and they find an email talking about them with the words, all expenses approved until deviant threat is eliminated. And then I want the shit to hit the fan.
Yeah, right?
It's that phrase so badly.
Yes. But you need to choose it. You need to be careful about when.
I know.
I've been running through my head since it had come up earlier in the show about how far spread Mage is in the popular culture, and it didn't hit me until just now, but Dune.
Dune. Like Dune as in Frank Herbert's Dune?
Yes.
I mean, that's
you've got a whole bunch of different houses going. I mean, I'm talking about the houses as in the royal houses, but the Bene Gesserit against the Mentats against the, there's a lot of magic involved there. The voice,
yeah, but it's super pre-Mage. Like,
yeah,
Dune came out way before Mage, so and I mean that kind of gets back to Mage has some very universal themes in it. I mean, it's it's really easy to see Mage in other media. I get into like arguments with my partner because every once in a while I'll be like, "That's Mage," and he'll just give me this side eye, and I'm like, "Yeah, I know they probably never read a Mage book, but still."
Yeah.
It captures the feel, and that's what matters.
But
It
you
does.
know, and that's all you need. But you know,
exactly.
it's Mage.
Although it is funny because every once in a while I'll watch something. You know, I had this conversation about Mr. Robot, which is super Mage, but
Yeah.
probably not on purpose. And then, like, I was watching Adventure Time, and I hit, like, this string of episodes, and I'm like, somebody played Mage.
Somebody
Like,
had to have.
she is a
saw
technocrat
that
and
post.
giving a monologue about her hubris and how she's fallen to it. And she just had a fight with, like, a high ritual mage about respecting his process. Yeah, no, somebody played Mage. You know, so it's interesting when enough of the pieces come together that you're pretty sure the inspiration did come from Mage. And there are definitely, like, Lucy, that was ripped from Mage. It just was.
Hold on 1 second. I have something for Vanessa. Go on.
Yes, of course. Yes. May his path cleanse the world.
That's right.
So, yeah, I mean, so I don't know. That would be I'll throw a question out there. That would be an interesting question for everybody here. What's the most Mage, non-Mage thing you've ever seen?
Oh, I'm going to have to think about that one for a second.
Demon the Descent.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Because Mage the Awakening, in a lot of ways, is not very magey. Like, I'm not a big fan. But Demon the Descent captures a lot of the feel of reality. It's just something you can...
Well, yeah,
the
because
virtual
that's
adept.
all Matrix and Dark City and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff was inspiration.
It's a game of technognostic espionage, what
Yeah.
captures the feel of mages who have to hide from the technocracy and all the hidden weird shit that you find in Mage, and how their powers are very much like reality hacking, like the virtual adepts and stuff, and how there's more to reality, and that's in the terms of themes and feel and stuff. The game that's in power level is the one I could think about. That's
Well,
most
you're talking about
important.
games. He said anything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I was just thinking games instantly because you
Oh,
mentioned all of the movies I wanted to take up, like
Well,
Limitless. Actually,
for
Limitless
for
is
me,
good.
Oh, yeah.
For me, I would say that Inception, I thought really
Yes.
seemed to resonate to me a lot about Mage.
Yes.
The just because, like, not just how they could warp the reality and everything like that, but just the way that, like, they were hacking into people's dreams to steal information, and the way that it was all symbolic on how you had to find the information. I thought that there was a lot of Mage type chronicles that you could run just on that premise. And then the whole idea of, being trapped in a dream realm and never getting back, and, always being hunted by the subconscious of the host that you're in. I thought that really had a lot of Mage themes.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go with Hellboy.
That's interesting.
I kind of see it. Like, it's kind of a very Society of Ether, still in the technocracy kind of pulp angle. But I guess Hellboy is like if Mage and Changeling had a love child.
Yeah.
Oh,
there
yes.
you go.
That's definitely
Yeah.
a
And
Mage
maybe some
Changeling
Demon the
crossover.
Fallen in there.
Well, there's a little demon in there. I mean, title character.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. The other one that really stands out to me, I don't know if any of you've seen it, The Adjustment Bureau.
Yeah.
Super NWO.
Yeah.
Super duper NWO.
I read the original short story, which is awesome, by the way. That's a Philip K. Dick story, right? Yeah? I think it is.
Pretty much anything written by him would have a lot of Mage type themes.
Pretty much.
Scanner Darkly. Scanner
Oh,
Darkly.
yes. Scanner Darkly.
I actually watched that
yeah.
tripping the first time. It was bad.
There's also like a series of like young adult or teen tween novels called Kane Chronicles, which is all about like Egyptian magicians and stuff that kind of fits with Mage. I used
Nice.
to movie Limitless as an example too.
Yeah.
Limitless
Limitless is super mage.
super Mage. There's a game too that I actually am working on as a freelance writer called New Gods of Mankind. That's at least in the power scale and the creativity of like what you can do is the closest to Mage. Yes, actually surpasses Mage in a lot of areas, but anyway. And when it comes to like creativity, it's like, but there's a lot of things you can point at as Mage, because as we had pointed out, Mage is the embodiment of humanity, and you can find traces of it in all of our fiction. Like there are definite pieces of fiction that does not resonate with vampire at all, or werewolf, or
Push.
wraith.
There's another one
Yeah.
that has some very Mage feel to it.
Which one?
one?
Push.
I don't think I've seen that.
You
Yeah, I
should.
don't think I have either.
I think you've all seen the poster of the movie, which is a guy telekinetically pushing a car.
Yeah, and then but
Okay.
you've got people who can shadow you. They just concentrate, and it just completely blots you out from any kind of magical or psychic tracing.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole movie is these guys are mages. That's all there is to it. They call them, what do they call them in the movie? They're mutations, but there's like the technocracy that goes around trying to get rid of them, kind of thing. But all the telekinetic powers, the ability to see the future, to push somebody, to be able to that's dominate. But still, I think there's probably a Mage version of that as well. Is the ability to make somebody just stick a gun in their mouth and blow their brains out.
Well, and so another thing, and it's so mainstream people forget about it. X-Files.
Oh yeah.
I think X-Files actually hits some notes that a lot of other stuff misses, because X-Files is like the perfect example of you're an awakened agent, but you only have, I don't know, maybe two enlightenment, because that's what they call it. So
Yeah.
you don't believe in magic, but then
But there's all this weird shit going on anyway.
yeah, but then Mulder is that traditionalist who went through processing, but the processing didn't take. So, the union's holding him at arm's length and manipulating him into doing their work, even though he's their enemy. They don't care. That's fine. Like, you're where you need to be to, move the timeline forward. And that's all, like, I mean, it's kind of universal conspiracy theory, but it's very, like, specific to some of the system dynamics in Mage.
Well,
and I
the
think it's
poster,
fascinating.
I want to believe.
Yeah. Exactly.
He knows there's all this weird shit going on out there, and he wants to believe that these things are possible. And that's you're right. I hadn't even thought about the X-Files until you mentioned it. But that's perfect. And wait a minute.
And it's one of the few things that really crosses like technocracy and tradition, because it's full of magic and the supernatural, but it's totally a technocracy story.
Wait a minute.
And,
By the way, they did do a set of LARP rules for Mage.
Oh, they did.
I
they
got
did
the book
this.
in my hand, the Laws of Ascension.
Just
Yeah.
not under the update.
No.
No, they're on the old rules. And I mean, they solved some of the problems. They basically everything is handled through rotes. You have your sphere, and I think it's pretty easy to basically go and pre-approve new uses of your spheres with the storyteller, but everything has to be pre-approved. And I don't know. To me, it's just like the social dynamic doesn't make sense. I can't imagine like the Toreador is opening her new club and throwing a party, and every vampire in town is here, and that's the setting for our LARP tonight, and things are going to go sideways. What is the equivalent of that for Mage? Oh wait, it doesn't exist.
Well, no.
Yeah.
Like, my
Mages-
point is that you've made mention that getting a group of mages together in a room would be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Well, why can't you use LARP rules for Mage in a vampire setting or werewolf setting, not as an NPC, but as a player character?
because crossovers don't work smoothly.
Yeah, no.
And
But
it would
crossovers
be
don't
a
work smoothly.
lot of extra work on the storyteller's part.
And that's
And-
their fucking job.
And mages destroy stories.
If
Like
you want to do
that.
it, hats off to you.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing with as Victor mentioned. Sorry, mages destroy stories because, like, investigation, for example, like there's someone attacks and they leave these objects. Mages just give me that. Oh, I found the guy. He's over there, and I give us 30 minutes and we will have found out everything about this.
Okay. So
There's
you're saying
very-
they're too OP for even that group of...
No, it's not OP. It's just that the overpowered would indicate that they're unbalanced. No, they're balanced for a different level. Like, it's like they deal with a whole... Like, the scale of which they operate is so different than the most vampires. Like that's the thing with the Tree World of Darkness, because they up the scale for each game. Vampire is a global political thing. Like, that's as far as you can get.
The Jihad.
Jihad, right? Werewolf, it deals with the universe, or at least the planet and shit, like the spirit, the Umbra. Like, you're on that scale. Mage deals with reality, like every single strand of it is the battleground.
Yeah.
In which, so they're OP, but they're just operating on a different power scale. And vampires can beat mages and stuff like.
Yes, they can.
They can definitely beat mages and stuff. It's not like mages win instant success, la di da. But there's a lot of obstacles vampires would face that mages would just those are a thing. Now they're not long. Now they're not a thing anymore. Like surveillance. Like they don't need to place it like they can find out so much more information. Like, information is really the easiest example to come with. I'm not talking about fireballs. They can spy on you with ease. Like,
and counter magic. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I've got Prime. I'm going to wait for the prince. He's like bringing his enemies in, and he knows he can majesty the heck out of them. And I'm going to sit in the back of the room, and I just unwove his majesty. Well, shit's about to get real. Like, that is such a basic power for mages, because it has to be when they're fighting each other. You throw them in with another super, and it's like, okay.
All right.
And like mages as a starting level, like a starting mage can, they can't give direct commands, but like mind is the great area where vampires usually excel. But like mages have all the versatility, like with just mind sphere, they can read your thoughts at starting level without any smudging on the ST's part. Like, it's not going to.
But
push
would it
anything.
work against Kindred? That's the question.
Yeah, it would.
I mean, in Mage 20, all other supernaturals were given some level of counter magic, which is purely a game balancing thing, and honestly, I'm okay with it, because mages were the ridiculous glass cannons, and so they'd have a chance to resist of some sort if you built that concept into the LARP rules. Cool, but they could still do it. And even having a chance, I mean, like, as an example, you can start with 3 Arete, and at 3rd level mind, you can read all languages. It doesn't matter. You just made up a language, no one else on Earth knows it. It doesn't matter. The meaning is encoded into what you've put down, and I can see the patterns of that mind on the paper, so I can decode anything. That's big in a vampire game with a lot of
because intrigue
espionage going
and secrecy are a big part of the Jihad.
Yeah, I mean,
you can read any hidden meaning anyone comes at with you. Like if you use Mind Tree and being like, okay, is this code for something? Is that what it really means? Okay. Or is that what the strange language on the sarcophagus? Okay, it's not an antediluvian in here, guys.
Yeah. Or like Entropy 3. I mean, Entropy 3. That prince is about to do or the Primogen Council is about to do a big, convoluted, complicated thing, and they've done everything to make sure absolutely nothing goes wrong. Well, something's going to go wrong.
And you just throw the Heisenberg into the mix, and all hell breaks loose.
Yeah,
or especially if you're especially nasty, you get in the family with Quiloptic entropy in there, and it's like Murphy's Law. Everything.
Well, That's awesome.
That's their
actually
basic
pretty
entropy. They are the masters of Murphy's law. That's their basis for entropy. Like, they found it interesting because all their magic is like, I like to group magic into static magic, sorcerers, dynamic magic. That's mages, technocrats, marauders, and I call it entropic magic. I can't pronounce
Entropic magic.
Entropic magic, I call the founding thing, because all their magic actually is more to harm. It doesn't mold reality as much as it harms it and just fucks with it.
Yeah.
It's actually in the books, but I just attached that term to it because I think it like makes a nice little triumvirate. Because the static, dynamic, and entropic triumvirate is a big thing of both mage and werewolf, so it would nice to just complete the circle with that.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I mean, and the other thing with LARP is, most people I know who LARP in some sort of league organization. And so,
Mind's Eye, whatever.
Mind's Eye, MES, whatever, okay, cool, I want to run a Sabbat game. I'm going to run a Sabbat game. And what you talked about, there isn't a great space for an all-mage game, and so somebody makes, I really want to play a mage character in this vampire game, and maybe they find some storyteller who knows the rules well enough to run it. And maybe they get all the papers signed to get their character approved, and then they can never travel. Because any other storyteller is going to be like, I'm literally... I am not equipped to run this character. And that's just not a dynamic that's going to work.
But it should. That's the problem.
But it shouldn't. Like, why should a storyteller who's stepped up to run a vampire game be expected to learn the rules for a character type that isn't viable to play on their own?
Yeah.
But, so let's switch it up. Let's say... would it be easier? I guess it would be easier to allow a mage character into a tabletop game.
Yeah, and that's where the Tell My Hero book comes in, with its very well-made mage rules if you're playing vampire. Because it talks about a lot about how magic deals with vampire. It doesn't take away all the spotlight. It keeps the power level of mage, but because of the way foundation, you can't, like, if with foundations and pillars, you can't have all the 9 spheres. Like, you lose like 2 of them. So it's that's the best way to do it. Actually, if you don't want to sit around and just learn an entire game for one character, use the new Tell My Hero book for mage.
Yeah. And I mean, even, an individual tabletop storyteller, can learn mage because they want to learn mage, and they're going to allow at their table, and that's cool, and they're taking on that extra work because they want to, but you don't have, like, the league traveling dynamic. And the league traveling dynamic is really, for me, what makes it, like, the game has to be able to stand on its own to be worth writing the 600-page book. Like,
Well, and if you're running a vampire LARP and you have a player that wants to play a mage, they can be a Tremere. If you're running a werewolf LARP and somebody wants to be a mage, they can be a Yucatina. There's other options that they don't have to. You shouldn't have, as a ST, you shouldn't feel in a situation where a player walks up to you and says, "This is what I'm going to play, whether you like it or not, and you have to let me do it." Like,
that's never been an option.
But that's what you were indicating, though.
I was saying it should be possible. Not that it would be possible.
So, but there are other options that people that want to play those kind of characters can still do with the existing rules instead of having to do a crossover that would very much complicate life for everybody involved. And it depends on, even for tabletop, it depends on storytellers. Like, some storytellers, they're like core rule book only. You can't use anything outside of that. If it's a merit, if it's a discipline, none of that. I only have the core book. I only know the core book. That's all you're allowed to play with. Or whatever the case may be. There could be many other restrictions involved. Could be, I know lots of people they've had bad experiences with a certain mage guild or a certain vampire clan, and they won't let people play that clan just because they don't want to have to deal with what they assume is going to be too much stress for them. So the idea of having now an additional rule set that they have to try to integrate for one player does seem like a bit of a something that most people probably would not do.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, like, in a LARP, you want to have the whole world of darkness you've fallen in love with at your fingertips.
Yeah, that's
but
what I'm saying.
Mage, and I understand how, like, you want to have that. I just don't think it, like, with the old LARP books, when it was this tiny little prop thing you could carry around with you, and you think about what got invested in the art and the printing and that word count, maybe Mage was worth writing, you know, just to have as that one-off fodder. Now that the standard is, I mean, the new Vampire LARP book is as big as Vampire 20th. It might be a little smaller, but I'm staring at it on my shelf, and they're basically the same size. The amount of, like, money and playtesting and art development that goes into that, and the fact that it's having to be funded by Kickstarter, you're not going to get enough people to kickstart Mage. It's Mage LARP will not kickstart.
There's not as you know. There's the mechanic. You know how Mage destroys all stories. It's the cultural aspect that's the biggest problem. However, is that you know Mage culture doesn't work for LARP, but you know, but changelings do, vampires do, werewolves do. You know, I'm pretty sure you could argue that you know demons from Demon the Fallen do just fine. Mages, no.
So you're saying Demon would be easier to write LARP rules for?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say that definitely because
their powers are a lot more definite. Like there is some flexibility, especially at the higher spheres, but they're still very definite on what they can do. Not as much as Mage, where it's like I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah, the whole reality warping thing,
right?
Well, and I mean, the whole point with Mage is you're supposed to be able to do whatever you want. Like, I mean, it's really hard for a storyteller, but like right now I have a game with like one adept on the verge of becoming a master and like 4 masters. They're low. I mean, they've only been masters briefly. They have like 1 sphere at 5 or like 5 arete, and they're about to get a sphere at 5. But even that is just mind-bendingly difficult to manage in a tabletop setting. You know, but I want to let them do these ridiculous things and then have ramifications fall from the sky, because that's what Mage is about. It's about you have amazing power, but really, like, you have to think about and interact with what does the application of this power mean. And
with great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly, but like
we are not going to be sued for this.
But like, you know, at a tabletop where you have 1 storyteller and 3 to maybe 7 players. 7 is a crazy game for Mage. I've done it, but it's crazy. You know, okay, but Jesus. When you're like...
We've got 9 people in well, they had 9 before I left the D&D game, and that was starting to get... I mean, when you roll initiative and you going around the table to get everything done, it could take hours just to get 1 round done.
Well, and with spheres, it's even worse. But like when your storyteller to character ratio might be a storyteller to 12 characters, and like 1 main storyteller for a game that has 30 people, and maybe 2 or 3 side storytellers that are there to like adjudicate rules and they help plan some stuff between sessions. But there's like 1 guy who knows everything, and you have 20, 30 players because you're in a big city and it's a popular LARP, which in theory, some LARPs are going to scale to that if it's popular enough to be worth printing.
My first LARP game had 30 plus, actually.
Like, how do you engage with that personal ramifications of every spell you cast? How do you even do that? Like, and if you can't do that, why are you playing Mage?
Yeah, the whole theme structure falls apart.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mage is out for LARP. You might as well just say fuck it, we're done.
Yeah, unfortunately, Mage culture...
Until we're proven wrong. Until they're proven wrong. They say they'll print or they'll do whatever the fans want. If there's enough demand for it, they'll go for it. They throw up a Kickstarter, and if they raise the funds for it, so you know, if there's a lot of rabid Mage LARPers out there that just want the rules no matter what,
Yeah,
I
harass
did
the
it.
hell out of them.
Sometimes fans, as much as fans are important. Sometimes fans doesn't know what they want. They think they know what they want, but
Yeah.
sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't. This would be one of those cases, I believe, that like they think they want Mage LARP until they get it, and then they would be like,
Yeah,
oh god.
but by then though, then they already have it. The rules are done, and Pete's happy. So
We will have police to
Yeah,
Pete.
but I want LARP rules for Wraith too, but it's never gonna fucking happen.
Yeah, because of the
Yeah.
shadow. You can never make that
Yeah,
work. The shadow is the big
Well,
problem
no,
of
we came up with a way for that. Oddly enough, Carl, we did. You get somebody else to play your shadow.
Problem is that creates such antagonism in players. Like, that's always been the solution.
Yeah, LARPers are so vicious to each other already.
I mean, if you are a woman, you are accused of sleeping your way to the top somehow, instantly. In a lot of
That
LARPs.
we covered that bullshit and got in the ladies gaming show.
Yeah.
It was a lot of that, and I'm like, why are there trolls? Why the fuck can't we just have nice fucking people? No.
Well, and I mean, and I think Wraith actually, much as Wraith would be a really hard game to LARP, I still think Wraith would be easier to do as a LARP than Mage.
I'm right there with you on that.
And I think, the By Night Studios, they've already deviated from the tabletop and the old LARP games pretty severely and gone, hey, what makes a good LARP? Let's do that. Doing cinematic flow for Werewolf is totally off the maps, but it's cool. So, like, with Wraith, I have apprehensions, but if they said we're doing Wraith and if they could somehow muster up the support to back it, I would probably back that just as what their crazy idea is. Mage, honestly, I'd be like, I'm going to wait till that comes out to spend my money.
Oh, gotcha.
Right.
So, okay, but I do believe there are, as you were vehemently pointing out earlier, that you don't think it could get a Kickstarter. I think it could. I honestly think there are enough rabid Mage players out there. It probably wouldn't hit the stretch goals, but it would probably get the base book done. Wraith? No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, Wraith... Yeah, I think it's going to depend on what happens when Wraith 20th hits.
But Wraith would be easier to incorporate into a vampire game or a werewolf game than
way
Mage
easier.
would.
Yeah, way easier. I mean, it's funny because people... Well, I don't want to get off topic. I mean, it's a Mage game. Or a Mage podcast. I don't want to go on about Mage.
Man, we're in our last 10 minutes anyway. Go for it.
We have deviated as much as we can possibly do anyway. I got into Demon of Descent earlier, so please, go on.
Yeah, well, okay, I mean, I was just going to say people talk about how Wraith doesn't cross over well, and I honestly kind of think Wraith crosses over. I've talked with so many people like, oh, you can't do crossover games, and I'm like, okay, Slua, Euthanatoy, Giovanni, like, I mean... Yeah, the zombie, the Hearts and Skulls. I mean, Wraith, in terms of like having a player crossover, like we're going to have a game with a werewolf and a vampire and a Wraith, there are definitely some challenges. I mean,
yes, which is what I hope to run someday.
But in terms of like using Wraith thematically and rules-wise in the other games, it's appropriate everywhere. Like it just...
It crosses over better than most.
It does. It really does. Yeah, so I mean that's something when I first started playing World of Darkness, everyone I knew ripped on Wraith, and I didn't really look into it because you heard so much. I heard so much crap about it, and then when I finally read Wraith, I was like, this is rules
is better than average. What the hell?
Like clearly they ran up against deadlines and released some stuff when it needed another round of editing. Hardly the only old White Wolf text that ran into that.
Exactly.
But like the concepts are brilliant, the flavor is amazing. All this needed was like 2 more editing passes.
Something like that. Yeah.
I can deal with that. Like I can improv that stuff. That stuff you can manage. No, I mean Wraith is thematically brilliant and beautiful and crosses over with everything. So my 2 cents on that.
No, that's great. It's a good point. It really is.
Yeah. Wraith is, very easily considered one of the best written World of Darkness games. Like, it's the best one to... I think it's the best one to read. Like, if you just want to...
Yes.
Well, and it had the most coherent story, like,
Is
and
it?
the most successful coherent story. They tried to do a coherent story with Changeling in second edition.
That didn't
We
work
don't talk.
out.
We don't talk about that. We don't talk about Changeling.
Nope.
It
I,
never happened.
I like Changeling. I am
Go
so psyched for C20.
Go away.
Yeah.
Go
Fucking
away.
fairies. Got
Go
fucking
away,
fairies.
fucking Ferris! Like go away, fucking Ferris, and go and read Chains of the Lost. A much better game. But
Oh well, if you like PTSD,
PTSD the game, yay! But
I mean,
PTSD, yay! It helps lives. Woo.
oh no, it doesn't.
I'm pretty sure it does. I think that my completely serious statement here would qualify as that. So I'm just saying we're not going to get sued. We're not getting sued. You know, we have Disney, the Dark Father, on our side. Therefore,
That's right.
Dark Father, Dark Mother, either way, I leave my burnt offerings to Lilith as necessary.
I mean, you're just Bahari scum, so I get it.
I like being Bahari scum.
What life is pain, tribulation and stuff, and respecting
Emo crap.
women. I'm pifting you, man. I'm pifting
Oh,
you.
pissed away.
Piffed away. I'm just saying, praise Cain.
Hail Kane.
I actually had this weird concept for a mage in my head. Not a mage ghoul, but just a mage who believed he drew power from vampire lineages, so he needed Vitae to do his shit. And he was like this novice guy for some reason. I had this weird, that was a weird idea I had, but I thought it would be cool. To be like, because there's a flaw in mage, like you have like this essential component. And the more you pay for it, the more rare the substance. And it's like, okay, to use magic, I need vampire blood.
That's like a 7-pointer right there.
Yeah. It's doable. It's very hard. But
Yeah.
it's doable. And that's when you get the supernatural companion merit.
Oh, right.
You have to.
Yeah. But yeah, that's and of course we would all praise Cain there. It would be great.
Of course.
It's all
Actually,
propaganda, man. It's all
I-
propaganda.
In the Power Corrupts mage game, actually some of like 2 or 3 of the players became Sabbath ghouls.
Oof. Oh, that is harsh.
Yeah. That happened. It was definitely something.
So who did we lose? Yeah, we're losing folks right and left here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What?
it's near the end of the show, and people are, and we
It
are
is
like
getting
all
tight.
over
It is
the place
getting on
now.
towards that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we just do shameless plugging of ourselves?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, plug yourself, Carl.
I will plug myself because since last time I've actually started being like a freelance writer for a small role-playing studio called Dark Skull Studios, which has a game line called New Gods of Mankind.
Send me
which
a link and I'll put it into the description for when we archive the show.
I will find the right true link because I don't think the website works. But anyway, and I'm working on shit. It's good. You should all look at it. Shameless plugging.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, send me the link. I'll be happy to look at it.
Excellent. Dry true. So anyway,
Look,
and,
hey, no, we want to be supportive to the gaming community in general because I think we're starting to find out that the gaming community is a lot more coherent than it used to be. Because we now have the ability to connect on a level that we never could before.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, prior to the net, we didn't really, other than the various BBSs and newsletters and shit. That's all we had.
yeah.
And I mean,
Yep.
my first LARP game, we found out from a freaking flyer on a telephone pole. Okay, so.
Yep.
Yes, I want to be supportive to every member of the gaming community if we can. And
Well, yeah. And in that spirit, I'm going to push in my own cheap plug.
Please.
I'm starting. I've been working on a project with a friend for a little over a year now. Redcircuitry.blogspot.com.
it's in the link for the description already.
And right now, it's just character designs and some short stories and some hints at world building. It will be a webcomic. We have a good backlog done.
I love me some good webcomics now.
Yeah, we're having to change a little bit of design at the moment because of some changes we did in the story, and we need to figure out our hosting situation. So I don't know exactly when the full project will go online, but we decided to start leaking some character designs and background, like early sketches and short stories we're doing, just to keep ourselves honest and getting stuff public and whatnot. So
did we
take a
lose
look at it.
Carl?
I heard.
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. I just noticed you popped up online, and I was like, oh, okay, that must be something else.
No.
Sorry about that. Yeah, are you considering animation maybe?
Not at this point. Like that would be, we'd have to get a lot of ducks in a row and story done and whatnot before we could think about animation. And we don't have the skill set for that currently. Once we have a chapter or two out, if somebody wanted to animate some of our story, that is definitely a conversation I would love to have, but we're not there yet.
Okay, gotcha. Because there are a couple of webcomics online on YouTube. You're probably familiar with them. Cyanide and Happiness.
Yeah, I mean, so Red Circuitry is going to be like futuristic, sci-fi, cyberpunk. I love Cyanide and Happiness, but it would definitely be a bigger project to animate some of this stuff.
Right, gotcha. And I added you, Carl. I added your link to the description.
Excellent.
All right, we are at our 2-hour mark, ladies and gentlemen. We have just a few folks left listening live, and want to give a quick hi to everybody who will be listening to the archive later on. We do seem to get quite a bit of that. I want to thank our guests tonight, Karl Hoftaniska.
Hoftaniska, excellent.
And Victor Kinzer. And, of course, my wonderful co-host, Jacob.
Yeah.
He is one of the main reasons this thing keeps going. I will be honest with you. So, and we will probably have Karl and Victor back again because we like our good hosts, our good guests. We really do. Especially when you have something to talk about, We don't ever want to get anybody that just wants to sit there and listen, because you got to actually add to the conversation, and we would like to get other folks coming into the show, more guests for more shows. So if you are listening to this later on and you would like to be a guest on the show, please go over to our Facebook page, shoot us a message, and we'll interview you and get you on. So, again, thank you very much to our guests, and thank you again, Jacob. And we are going to be out. Everybody have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks.